the detonation. It happens over a major Ukrainian city in the east. Not the capital, but still a key logistics and industrial hub. A place with rail yards, depots, and hundreds of thousands of civilians. Satellites see it first. A blinding flash, then a rapid expansion of fire, a column of debris pushing into the sky. Russian state media calls it a high-precision strike on military infrastructure. Global censors call it what it is, a tactical nuclear detonation, within a radius of several kilometers. Buildings vaporize or collapse. Asphalt liquefies. Cars become molten shadows on the roads. And people in the open are reduced to nothing recognizable. Those indoors, further from the epicenter, are hit by a shockwave traveling faster than sound. Windows shatter, lungs rupture, and bodies are thrown like dolls against walls. You would see a ring of total destruction at the core, a wider belt of catastrophic structural damage, and fires igniting everywhere as the thermal pulse sets rooftops, forests, and fuel depots ablaze. Communications in the immediate area go dark. Cell towers collapse. Power grids trip offline. Emergency services, the ones that aren't just wiped out, are blind, deaf, and burning. But somewhere else, thousands of kilometers away, alarms are already going off. Not in the city itself, in the satellite and early warning networks of multiple countries. Within the first 2 hours, the world realizes. In Kiev, the first reports are confused. Massive explosion. No contact with regional authorities. Unconfirmed high-yield blast. Officials know the war has already pushed conventional weaponry to its limits, but this looks different. Within minutes, military analysts in bunkers and offices start comparing blast signatures to no nuclear tests. The match is too close. Ukraine declares what everyone is about to confirm. A nuclear weapon has been used against our territory. The president appears in a fortified room, pale but controlled, and records an emergency address, not just to the nation, but to the world. In Brussels, Washington, London, Berlin, Warsaw, phones ring simultaneously. Article 5, the Mutual Defence Clause, isn't triggered automatically because Ukraine is not a NATO member. But the conversation starts immediately around something more dangerous than legal wording. If we let this stand, what's next? NATO's nuclear planning groups convene emergency secure calls. Defence ministers join from underground facilities. Military chiefs start opening contingency folders that haven't been touched in decades. Radar coverage over Eastern Europe is expanded. Fighter jets scramble. Not to attack, but to watch, to protect airspace, to make sure this is not the first of many. Nuclear-armed submarines receive coded messages, remain silent, stay hidden, await further orders. Inside Russia, state TV calls it a decisive move to end the conflict and claims that only military targets were struck. The official line, the weapon used was low yield. It was necessary to stop enemy offensives. It was a warning to outside powers not to interfere further. Behind closed doors, generals know what they've just done. They have broken the nuclear taboo, the unwritten rule that no nuclear weapon should ever be used in war again. Some hardliners celebrate, some strategists hesitate. All understand this. They've just rolled a dice with the entire global order on the line. In the first 12 hours, panic and posture kick in. Satellite photos leak to major news outlets. Video from surviving outskirts trickles onto social media. A distant, unnatural cloud towering over the horizon. Burning districts. People with burns, dust, and shock wandering through ruined streets. Hashtags begin to trend. Be nuclear strike. 72 hours. Don't escalate. In cities across Europe, People crowd around televisions in bars, train stations, offices. Some start calling relatives, asking if they should leave the city. Others rush to ATMs and supermarkets. The fear isn't just about radiation, it's about what comes next. Is this the opening shot of something much bigger? The North Atlantic Council holds a closed-door crisis session. Options are laid out in blunt language. Option 1, maximum condemnation, no direct military response, massive sanctions, full diplomatic isolation, increased weapon supplies to Ukraine, no NATO troops crossing the line. Option 2, conventional military response against Russian forces in Ukraine, long-range missiles targeting Russian positions within Ukraine, cyber attacks on critical infrastructure, naval deployments in nearby seas, strictly avoiding strikes on Russian soil to prevent escalation. Option 3, direct strikes on Russian territory, high risk, seen in many capitals as borderline suicidal, almost guaranteed to provoke counter-escalation. Quietly discussed, loudly rejected. Option 4, nuclear signalling moving nuclear-capable aircraft closer to Russian borders, public announcements of heightened nuclear alert levels, subtle, terrifying messages. We will respond in kind if this continues. Every option carries a risk. Respond too weakly, and you normalize nuclear use. Respond too strongly, and you may start the war everyone's been afraid of since the 1940s. Privately, a few key NATO leaders agree on a red line. If another nuclear weapon is used, especially outside Ukraine, we will respond. But respond is still vague. Does it mean conventional strikes, cyber operations, a limited reciprocal nuclear retaliatory strike? No one wants to put those words in an official document. No one wants to be the one who writes the sentence that could end civilization. Yet they all need to signal resolve, to Moscow, to their own people, and to allies, the brink. Within Russian leadership circles, 3 factions quietly take shape. The one and done camp. They argue the strike was enough. Now is the time to push for negotiations from a position of terror. They fear further escalation will invite direct NATO intervention. The escalate to de-escalate camp. They believe another tactical strike, maybe on a military airfield or coastal target, will break Ukrainian resistance and frighten Europe into backing off completely. They view NATO as fundamentally risk-averse and divided. The "this has gone too far" camp smaller, quieter, and much more worried. They fear the global blowback, the economic collapse, the long-term danger to Russia itself. They start whispering about whether the leadership has made an irreversible mistake. No one in that room is a pacifist, but some are realists. Ukraine faces a different kind of impossible decision. The leadership must maintain military resistance, avoid falling into panic, reassure their population that they will not be abandoned, avoid taking steps that might give Russia a pretext for a second strike. They appeal to the world. If this is tolerated here, it can be used anywhere. They demand more air defences, more long-range weapons, more economic pressure on Russia. A clear public statement from NATO about consequences for further nuclear use. On the ground, first responders, overwhelmed, under-equipped, begin entering irradiated zones with makeshift protection, trying to rescue who they can. Many know they may be sacrificing their long-term health or their lives. They go anyway. By now, the global economic shock is cascading. Stock markets plunge. Energy prices spike brutally. Investors flee to perceived safe assets. Supply chains begin to wobble again. In major cities worldwide, people gather in spontaneous protests, outside Russian embassies, outside their own parliaments, in front of international organizations, demanding action. Some carry signs: No World War III. Others: No nuclear blackmail. Different countries, same fear. The second day, the first full night after the strike, is the darkest Europe has known in generations. Not in terms of light, but in terms of certainty. Air patrols continue from NATO countries. Fighter jets fly racetrack patterns along borders. AWACS aircraft monitor airspace, tracking everything that moves. Ground radars stare east obsessively. In underground bunkers, officers drink too much coffee, eyes glued to screens, hands hovering near phones that could pass on orders no one wants to hear. Every blip on a radar is double-checked. Every missile launch anywhere in the world is cross-referenced, because the fear now is that someone, somewhere, will misread something. A training exercise, a satellite glitch, a test launch announced but not properly transmitted. In a crisis like this, misunderstanding can be as deadly as malice. Countries that have maintained some communication channels with both NATO and Russia become suddenly very important. Through diplomats, intelligence services, and private envoys, messages begin to flow. From NATO capitals to Moscow, indirectly. We will not attack you, but if you use another nuclear weapon, the response will be severe. From Moscow back, we consider our nuclear use limited and justified. Any attack on our territory will be treated as a threat to our statehood. Everyone is trying to sound strong. No one wants to sound weak. But underneath that posture is the real message. We are terrified of what happens if we guess wrong about each other. By day 2, the horror of the initial blast is fully evident. Casualty estimates climb into the tens of thousands. Hospitals far from the blast zone are overwhelmed with burn victims and those exposed to radiation. Radiation plumes are tracked, showing where the wind will carry fallout, across farmlands, rivers, and possibly into neighbouring countries. At this point, NATO faces 3 strategic options. Option 1, freeze the line. No direct NATO strike, double down on support for Ukraine. Deploy more troops to NATO's Eastern Front as a deterrent. Announce new, unprecedented economic measures to punish Russia. Rely on global outrage to isolate Russia diplomatically. Option 2, conventional retaliation within Ukraine. Strike Russian units that launched or coordinated the nuclear attack. Destroy key command sites inside Ukrainian territory. Make it clear this is a direct answer to nuclear use, but stop short of crossing into Russian territory. Option 3, full escalation, the path to World War III. Strike Russian assets beyond Ukraine. Attempt to cripple Russia's war machine. Except that this could initiate a chain of actions that leads to open war between nuclear-armed alliances. Publicly, leaders lean toward option 1 or 2. Privately, they commission war games exploring option 3, because they have to. On the 3rd day, World War III is at the brink. The immediate shock begins to morph into something more dangerous: fatigue. People can't stay at maximum fear forever. They start to adapt, even to the unthinkable. Governments, however, remain on edge. What they fear most now isn't just a deliberate decision to escalate, it's accidental escalation. Picture this: a NATO fighter jet intercepts a Russian bomber near Allied airspace. There's a miscommunication. A warning shot is misinterpreted as an attack. One missile is fired in panic. Suddenly you don't have a nuclear crisis over Ukraine anymore. You have NATO and Russia exchanging live fire directly. Or a massive cyber attack hits power infrastructure in a NATO country. The government assumes it's Russia. It responds with its own cyber strike on Russian command networks. systems controlling early warning radars glitch or go offline. In that atmosphere, every failure looks like sabotage. Every anomaly looks like an attack. Some hardliners on the Russian side, emboldened by the first strike, push for another step. If they don't back down, we fire another one. But somewhere symbolic, like a remote sea area, as a demonstration shot. They argue it would show resolve, prove willingness to escalate, frighten NATO governments into freezing support for Ukraine. But from NATO's perspective, a second nuclear detonation, anywhere, would be crossing another line entirely. In their view, it wouldn't be symbolic. It would be proof that nuclear use is now on the table as a normal tool of war. That, they fear, is the beginning of a new era, or the end of this one. Behind the scenes, a different group works desperately for a way out. Diplomats, negotiators, and security advisors try to assemble a package that could halt any further nuclear use, freeze frontline positions, start some form of negotiation, even if it's ugly and deeply unjust. Give both sides something they can call a win, without pushing the world into total war. This might include a monitored ceasefire, international teams overseeing cleanup and radiation monitoring in Ukraine, a phased reduction of certain weapons deployments near borders, a framework for gradual easing of some sanctions in exchange for verifiable restraint. No one is happy with this, not Ukraine, which has just been attacked with a nuclear weapon, not NATO, which knows this sets a terrible precedent, not Russia, which fears looking weak and humiliated, but the alternative they all see, in the coldest military simulations, is worse. A chain reaction where each side feels forced to respond just a little bit stronger than the last move, until limited war stops being limited at all. By the 72-hour mark, the world stands in front of two doors. Door 1, contained catastrophe. Under this path, no second nuclear weapon is used. NATO stops short of direct strikes on Russian territory. Russia refrains from further nuclear escalation. A fragile, bitter, incomplete diplomatic process begins, more like crisis management than true peace. The cost: a Ukrainian city is gone. Tens of thousands of civilians are dead or irradiated. The nuclear taboo is shattered. The world has seen a nuclear weapon used in war again. Every future conflict now carries a higher risk of nuclear threats being made and taken seriously. Kids born this year will grow up in a world where nuclear use isn't just a historical memory. It's something you can watch on archived clips. Door 2, the slide into World War III. On this path, things unravel. Maybe a second nuclear strike hits another target. NATO decides it has no choice but to respond militarily. Russia interprets this as existential and raises its nuclear forces to full alert. Missiles are moved, bombers are loaded, submarines receive launch codes in sealed envelopes, or a conventional clash spirals out of control. A NATO ship is sunk. A Russian base is destroyed. Each side calls it self-defense. Each decides the other only understands force. You start seeing multiple fronts opening: the Baltic, the Black Sea, the Arctic, space assets, satellites, and communications being targeted, cyber warfare hitting everything from hospitals to financial systems to air traffic control. At this point, the term World War III stops being a dramatic headline. It becomes a technical description of reality, and every government, every military, every terrified person watching at home asks, where is the line where they finally push the button? This entire scenario is hypothetical, but the dynamics inside it, the fears, the miscalculations, the pressures are very real. They revolve around a few brutal truths. Nuclear weapons don't just threaten cities, they warp decision-making long before they're used. The first use of a nuclear weapon in war after decades of restraint wouldn't end a conflict. It would open a door no one really knows how to close. The most dangerous moments are not always when people want war, but when they're terrified of looking weak. In those first 72 hours after a nuclear strike on Ukraine, the world wouldn't just be deciding how to respond to one atrocity. It would be deciding what kind of century this is going to be. One where nuclear fire is used to settle disputes. Or one where even standing on the edge of that abyss scares us enough to step back. Hard, fast, and together. So the real question isn't just, what would NATO do? What would Russia do? What would Ukraine do? The deeper question is this: if a single nuclear blast can push the world this close to the edge in 72 hours, how many more chances do we think we're going to get before we run out of time? Be sure to let us know what you think we should be doing.